Professor Sawai is Emeritus Professor of Religious Studies at Tenry University. He's been a visiting scholar here in Oxford, but unfortunately I was away in Singapore when he was here, so we were unable to meet in the flesh, to echo a word from yesterday. So Professor Sawai has recently published a very fine book on Rudolf Otto and the Foundations of the History of Religion. That, in my view, is the finest study of Otto that we have to date. Today, Professor Sawai's presentation is a semantic attempt to clarify the totality of Rudolf Otto's work by describing the characteristics of his religious theory, characterized by such key terms as the holy and the numinous. So in his academic life, Otto had three faces, namely a Christian theologian, a philosopher of religion, and a scholar of comparative religion. In the history of religions, it's noteworthy that his religious theory is often regarded as the beginning of the phenomenology of religion. By analyzing his religious theory, Professor Sawai will semantically elucidate the nature of his religious perspectives. And I was most interested to discover from Professor Sawai's work that there was a relationship between Otto and Husserl, that they had exchanged letters and so on. So anyway, I very much look forward to hearing what Professor Sawai has to say. So Professor Sawai, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. A very kind introduction about me, and I'm very honored to be invited to the conference which is organized by Gavin, and so I'm very sorry, and I can't visit Oxford this time, but later next time, and I'm looking forward to visiting you. And now let me start my presentation. And the title is A Semantic Interpretation of Rudolf Otto's Religious Theories. My presentation is a semantic attempt to clarify the totality of Rudolf Otto by describing the characteristic of his religious theory, characterized by such the key terms, the holy and the numinous. In his academic life, Otto had three faces, that is, a Christian theologian, a philosopher of religion, and a scholar of comparative religion. And in this regard, Gavin just briefly introduced. And in previous study of Otto, his three faces have been interpreted separately, presenting a one-sided view of him as a scholar and human being. Here in my presentation, from the semantic viewpoint of religion, I would like to elucidate the nature of Otto's religious perspectives. In regard to more detailed discussion, and as Gavin introduced about my works, I would be very grateful if you could see my forthcoming book, Rudolf Otto and the Foundation of the History of Religion, published from the Bloomsbury. And now the content are followed. And let's see, introduction. Otto was a Lutheran theologian who served as the professor of systematic theology at Marburg University in Germany. In 1928, when he delivered his final lecture before resigning from Marburg, he is said to have called himself a pious Lutheran adherent for his student. After he was called to Marburg in the summer of 1917, he remained there for the last 20 years of his life. Since his family members were Lutheran Christians, Lutheran doctrine and faith greatly influenced Otto's personality formation. For Otto, who was raised in a strict Lutheran family, Lutheran faith was the foundation of his academic understanding of religion. Before beginning my argument on Otto, I'd like to talk about what I call semantic perspective briefly. By this perspective, I mean the standpoint of philosophical semantics of the Japanese philosopher Toshihiko Izutsu. Izutsu's semantic method is characterized by an analytical study of the key terms of a language with a view to arriving eventually at a conceptual grasp of the Weltanschauung or worldview of the people who use that language as a tool not only of speaking and thinking, but more important still, of conceptualizing and interpreting the world that surrounds them. A semantic attempt to understand Otto is inquiry, inquire for the nature and the structure of Weltanschauung of his religious theory, characterized by such key terms as the holy, the numinous, and the holy other. In short, it is a study of the meaning of religion in Otto's work. Otto's notion of religious a priori and divination were influenced by priest philosophy. Otto wrote Das Heilige largely in priest philosophical framework. In his life, after his trip to the East from 1911 to 1912, Otto became especially interested in Hindu faith and thought. Then he worked on the study of Indian religious thought while conducting Christian theological studies. In Das Heilige, Otto emphasized the centrality of the numinous in religion. In this book, Otto conceived of the holy in religion as a complex category of intimately combined non-rational and rational elements, and captured the essence of religion, whether in Christianity or in other religions. He said all human beings share the same common religious feelings. Otto published his work as Das Heilige, Westliche Mystik, in English, Mysticism East and West, and Die Grundreligion Indiens und das Christentum, in English, India, Religion, Grace, and Christianity. He placed the experience of the holy not only at the core of Christianity, but also at the center of all other religions, and had his conviction that Christianity is superior to other religions. One is Das Heilige, a phenomenological work of religion. One of the fundamental questions in the contemporary study of religion is whether religion is characterized by its uniqueness sui generis that cannot be reduced to society and culture, and whether the history of religion is a discipline with its own method of research. Such scholars of religion are the Rudolf Otto, Herodotus van der Leeuw, and Mircea Eliade are said to have promoted the so-called phenomenological study of religion, claiming the uniqueness of religion. In Das Heilige, Otto argued that the experience of the numinous are essential in religion. His book emphasized the non-rational side of religion based on his Christian theological interpretation. In regard to this issue, lively discussions have been developed among the scholars of religious studies, especially since the 1980s. The phenomenologists of religion argued their approaches distinct from such other disciplines as history, sociology, anthropology, and psychology. The examination of the meaning of the holy in Otto's religious theory may be effective for investigating these methodological issues. In the history of religion, Otto's religious theory is often regarded as the beginning of the phenomenology of religion. The phenomenologist Edmund Husserl called Otto's book Das Heilige a first beginning for a phenomenology of the religious. Ein erster Anfang für eine Phänomenologie der Religionen. While Husserl taught philosophy at the Göttingen University from 1901 to 1915, Otto also taught there from 1899 to 1914. Both Husserl and Otto knew each other at Göttingen. Uh, at the end of his letter to Otto, given 1919, Husserl said, quote, "From our Göttingen years, you know how highly I esteem you, and with what pleasure I seek out intellectual contact with you. Now that you have brought us phenomenologists worthwhile gifts, we would be very happy if new ones were to follow these." End quote. Moreover, in his letter, Husserl said, quote, "Allow me to express my impression in this way. It is the first beginning for a phenomenology of the religious, at least with regard to everything that does not go beyond a pure description and analysis of the phenomena themselves. To put it succinctly, I count here in the additional philosophical theorizing, and it is quite non-essential for the specific task and particular subject matter of this book, and it would be better left out. It seemed to me that the metaphysician theologian in Herr Otto had carried away on his wing Otto the phenomenologist. And it's very interesting, you know. And in that regard, I think of the image of the angel who covered the eyes with their wings. But be that as it may, this book will hold an abiding place in the history of genuine philosophy of religion or phenomenology of religion, end quote. In his letter to Otto, Husserl said that Heidegger is the first beginning for phenomenology of the religious, but Husserl finds the existence of the metaphysician theologian in Otto's work. From his phenomenological viewpoint, Husserl highly esteemed Otto's pure description and analysis of religious phenomena, but he adds, he counts here in the additional philosophical theorizing. In regard to Otto's theological perspective, Husserl was critical of the argument of Otto as a metaphysician theologian. There is no doubt that Otto as a theologian was less interested in Husserl's criticism, given from his phenomenological standpoint, although his view was very similar to the phenomenological one. In his book, Religious Essays, a supplement to the idea of the holy, 1931, Otto clearly said, and quote, "Our line of inquiry in the idea of the holy was directed toward Christian theology and not toward religious history or the psychology of religion. We sought by means of an investigation of the holy and its irrational as well as its rational content with their mutual interaction to prepare ourselves for a better and more definite understanding of the experience of God revealed in the Bible and especially in the New Testament." This is a clear statement of Rudolf Otto about experience of God as the Protestant theologian. Max Scheler, one of Husserl's disciples, also phrased thus Heidegger as a book of the phenomenology of religion. Scheler certainly evaluated Otto's description of the holy as phenomenological, but at the same time, he was still critical of Otto's argument presented in the conclusion of this book. In Das Heilige, Scheler found a different kind of phenomenological approach in his determination of the essence of the holy. Otto's perspective of the holy was evaluated by Scheler as a method which may lead to the phenomenological intuition of the essence. Phenomenologische Wesensschau. Scherer's phenomenological approach is the negative method in which the phenomena to be manifested are successively stripped in a comparison of them with similar or contrasting ones. As Husserl and Scherer suggested about Otto's radio theory, Otto is regarded as one of the pioneers of the phenomenology of religion among the historians of religion today. But it is noteworthy that Otto never called himself a phenomenologist of religion. This is a very important fact. So he never called himself a phenomenologist of religion, although many historians of religion call Rudolf Otto was a phenomenologist of religion, but he never. For he was clearly conscious that he worked on Christian theological studies as a Lutheran Protestant theologian. Thus, for Otto, thus Heidegger was directed toward Christian theological studies, not history of religion. 2, the experience of the holy is real. As is well known, Otto invented the term the numinous, thus numinose, in attempting to describe the non-rational element of the holy in religion. The content of the numinous can only be felt in one's own religious experience, since it cannot be described with words. Even though one can discuss and argue about it, one cannot make it understood with words. For everyday language or conceptualizing, it simply remained hidden, and it is the non-rational or holy other, das ganze andere. According to Otto, the feeling of the numinous is at the heart of the religious phenomenon. The numinous is the essence of religion, which is completely impossible to grasp conceptually and which fundamentally refuses to be interpreted. By paying attention to the experience of the numinous, which constituted the basis of the doctrine, Otto became interested in lived religion, gelebte Religion. The doctrine or religious thought in religion is rationalization or escalation of the non-rational element of religious experience, that is, the feeling of the numinous, sensus numinis, by theological or philosophical speculation. Otto called this process of rationalization the schematization of religion. Otto explored the essence of religion at the deep dimension of religious experience, arguing that the nature of religion cannot be reduced to anything else, such as society, culture, and human mind. From the depths of our religious experience, Otto attempted to capture the essence of religion. His approach to the essence of religion may share the same perspective of the phenomenological anti-reductionism. In Otto's religious theory, the holy is an a priori category composed of rational and non-rational components. Otto said that the holy is experienced as objective and outside the self. In this regard, the American historian of religion, Robert Orsi, argued that it is known as objectively real, not as delusion or fantasy for those experiencing it. The experience of the holy, which is relational and intersubjective, is really real to those who experience it. A semantic perspective from which reality is grasped, the meaning may share the methodological views similar to the phenomenological approach, while the rational in the holy belong to the concept with which one is familiar and which can be defined in words. The non-rational can only be experienced by preconceptual or transconceptual feeling, not by conceptual reflection. From the semantic viewpoint of religion, the fact that the holy is real for those who experience it implied that its reality present for them can be real, the meaning consisting of the relationship of the non-rational with the rational. In other words, the holy is characterized by a multi-layered structure of meaning. It is semantically categorized into the two, the dimension of meaning constructed in net derivative sense, and that in net original sense. The holy can be understood as consisting of the deep dimension of non-rational meaning and the superficial dimension of the rational meaning in ordinary language. When the holy is understood in the social and cultural surface, its meaning naturally becomes conceptual. For Advent living in the world of faith, however, the holy cannot always be conceptually expressed, for it contains plural meaning, which suggests the depth of the numinous. 3. The semantic dimension of holiness and the ideogram. In order to understand the depth of the holy, which escapes the structure of the ordinary empirical meaning and which is disclosed by the experience of the numinous, I would like to consider Otto's ideogram from the semantic perspective of religion. In Otto's religious theory, the holy is first intuited in feeling. Ideograms are employed to express the intuitive divination and become the essential aspect of human ideas of transcendent reality. Otto recognized the linguistic level of meaning called ideogram in a way that overlapped the two semantic dimensions. Otto's ideogram seems to be a concept of the holy, but it is by no means a concept. It contains analogical characteristics. Otto said natural or naturally or ordinary human beings who live in the world of everyday easily mistake the ideogram as the natural concept at the level of everyday meaning. In regard to the natural concept of ordinary human being, it is structurally identical with Husserl's phenomenological view of natural attitude, natürliche Einstellung. Through an ideogram, one can properly feel the genuine and the non-rational nature of the numinous. In this way, religion is protected against a rationalistic interpretation. For Otto, an ideogram is a kind of illustrative substitute for a concept. Semantically speaking, by an ideogram, Otto suggests the fluid or unarticulated depth of meaning beyond ordinary language. As example of ideogram in the Buddhist religious tradition, Otto mentioned the Buddhist term nothingness, wu in Chinese, mu in Japanese, and emptiness, shunyata in Sanskrit, each of which is an ideogram of the holy other, das Ganzande, that is the wonder mirum by itself. Wonder, the holy other, cannot be grasped or understood by ordinary language. Otto regards an ideogram as a non-conceptual pointer toward the holy. However, Otto did not elucidate the meaning of an ideogram more clearly in religious language, and thus did not clarify the differences between the language of scripture and that of ordinary life. Otto's interpretation of any ideogram is so vague that it has not been well understood. From a comparative religious viewpoint of the holy, Otto investigated the characteristics of Christian thought, comparing it with Indian religious thought, especially Vedanta philosophy, through the feeling of the numinous. Otto said Shankara and Meister Eckhart represent the way to salvation. Fundamental or mystical intuition, intuitus mysticus, exists at the root of the ideas. For both of them, pure existence, Zain, is expressed by Sat, the higher Brahman in Shankara's thought, while it is esse in Meister Eckhart one. Both Sat and esse represent the ideogram. It is important for the historian of religion to understand that from Otto's viewpoint, there is no meaning of holiness or sacredness in an object or action, although they may be easily misunderstood as sacred in religious tradition. Otto's primary interest is in the object toward which a religious feeling is directed. When we conceptualize Otto's view of numinous experience from the semantic perspective of religion, one can regard it as consisting of both the deep or unarticulated and the superficial or articulated dimensions of meaning. By using a language common to the ordinary world of meaning, the depths of meaning hidden in that language are suggested. For those whose faith is in Judaism or Christianity, God's wrath by no means a decrease of holiness, but rather a natural expression and element of holiness itself. God's wrath in the Bible is essentially unnatural, that is, luminous wrath. Otto traveled many times. He traveled a lot all over the world. But anyway, as far as more, as for modern scholars, direct exposure to religious tradition complemented his understanding of religious literature and the deeper meaning of religion. 4. A semantic understanding of luminous in religion. According to Otto, religion is perfectly sui generis and irreducible. This means that the luminous experience cannot be reduced by any socio-historical condition. Otto suggests that the luminous experience cannot be strictly defined by any concept. It is beyond the ordinary or rational dimension of reality. One can understand the luminous experience only by awakening this consciousness inside the human mind. According to the philosophical semantic theory of the Japanese philosopher Toshihiko Izutsu, the wholeness of the luminous experience in a specific context to which the Otto refers may not be an a priori attribute of religious experience, but the historical response in the religious commitment of the faithful. In Izutsu's word, the luminous experience by self is the primordial unity of the psychic and the metaphysical in their ultimate undifferentiation. It is the 0 point of consciousness from which all forms of consciousness emerge, and at the same time, the 0 point of being from which all forms of being emerge. Otto's concept of holiness implies that in religion, both the rational and the non-rational aspects are closely combined. This means that the holy constitutes a double structure of reality and experience. That is, the holy in its essential sense and that in its secondary sense, accompanied by the rational or moral aspect of religion. In other words, from the semantic perspective of religion, when one interprets the existence of the holy as the meaning for the adherent, it constitutes a double structure of meaning. That is, while the non-rational aspect of the holy is recognized as a deep dimension of meaning, its rational one is a superficial dimension of meaning. The rational or moral dimension of meaning in the holy can be expressed with the concept which one can rationally or logically understand in daily life, while the non-rational one cannot be grasped with any conceptualization. In regard to the non-rational factor of the holy, one can experience it only with emotion that before or beyond concept. Otto emphasized that the sense of the numinous is shared by humankind, although its specific form may be different in time and space. He emphasized that it cannot be expressed in ordinary language. It is called the Holy Other, das ganz andere. His concept of the Holy Other certainly had the meaning of God in his Christian theology. From the perspective of comparative religion, however, this same term semantically implies the ultimate reality of other religious traditions, Brahman and God Ishvara in Hindu tradition. This example showed us how the same religious concept used by Otto may contain different implications in different religious traditions. From the semantic religious perspective, one can say Otto's idea of the numinous suggests the depth of reality or the depth of religious experience, which is still unarticulated by language being before or beyond ordinary language. According to the Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure, language is a system of signs whose structure consists of a signifier, signifiant, and the signified, signified. In regard to the numinous experience, it is noteworthy that Saussure words an imbalance often occurred between the signifier and the signified. From the semantic view of religion, the dimension of numinous experience to which Otto referred corresponds to the depth of reality, or the depth of reality, or the depth of meaning beyond ordinary language. In Taoist philosophy of Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu, for example, is to argue that the depth of meaning in human reality can only be reached through the mystical or numinous experience. In his word, the reality of things as conceived by Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu is based on an extraordinary vision obtained in a peculiar kind of mystical experience. At a deep dimension of reality or at the unarticulated level of meaning beyond a superficial signified, there lies the vast space of a deep signified. At the depths of linguistic consciousness, there exists an enormous mode of reality that is the numinous, which is not combined with different signifier. Since it has no different meaning, there is no doubt that it is inexpressible in ordinary language. In short, from the semantic view of religion, the concept of the holy is Otto's religious theory consists of a double structure meaning. The superficial or articulated dimension of meaning characterized by the rational and moral aspect of reality, and the deep or unarticulated dimension of meaning suggested by non-rational aspect of reality, or the numinous which has no semantic articulation by language. Conclusion. According to the semantic interpretation of Otto's religious theory, in order to understand religion as it is in reality, one needs to grasp it at the deep and or unarticulate dimension of religion, dimension of meaning, not only at the superficial or articulated dimension of meaning. One has to pay attention to the dimension of the depth in the holy, going beyond the rational or objective understanding. The depth of meaning in religion is not understood in the horizontal dimension of meaning conceptually or intellectually, but in the vertical dimension intuitively. Scholars of religion must also attempt to understand religious phenomena in the depths of human reality. Their deep dimension of meaning can only be understood in their context. From such compound eye perspective, religion can be understood in the double dimension of meaning in regard to the holy, that is ordinary dimension of meaning and the deep one. Finally, in the introduction of this conference pamphlet, Gavin Flood said, the phenomenology of religion is a philosophical discourse about what it is to be human, and a way of offering an account of religion in a plural through history. Thus, a phenomenology of religion on this view is a kind of philosophical anthropology. According to Professor Pratt's view, one can say that Otto's religious theory provides us with the Christian theological discourse about what it is to be human, which can be regarded as the phenomenology of religion. Thus, Otto's religious theory is a kind of religious anthropology rather than philosophical anthropology. But anyway, a kind of religious anthropology based on the feeling of the numinous. Thank you very much for your attention.